If you're a fanatic of the unknown, unfamiliar, and enjoy creepy tales in story format, then welcome to GravesEnd. We upload 1 to 2 times weekly, so hit that like and subscribe button, and don't forget to ring that bell for all notifications. Now on with our story. Everly was a young rebellious teen who had a dark side and was intrigued with witchcraft. She and her friends had dabbled in the black arts, but only with simple spells, nothing that was really harmful to anyone else. But her life now will be forever changed. She and her mom are moving to the south to be closer to family and to get away from a living evil. They finally reached this little town that only had 2 red lights, a small grocery store, a school, and a post office. If you blinked your eyes while driving, you would miss the entire town. Everly wasn't happy about the move, being taken away from her friends and the only life she ever knew, but she really didn't have a choice. Everly never knew her real father, and her mom wouldn't tell her anything about him. And when Everly was only 9 years old, her mom married a wealthy man. He was not only mentally abusive, but he had become progressively physically abusive toward her mom. He came home one night after being out drinking and started beating Everly's mom severely. Everly tried to intervene, but he picked her up and threw her against the wall, knocking her unconscious. When she woke up, her mom was lying limp on the floor in a pool of blood. She tried shaking her to wake her up, but her mother didn't respond. Everly called 911, and both her mom and Everly were taken to the hospital. Her mom had been beaten so badly she had internal bleeding, and it required surgery. Everly had a concussion, and she also had to have 2 stitches above her eye. And as soon as her mom was released from the hospital, they rented a car and was on their way to their new life. Over the years, Everly's mom had a little money put back just in case she ever needed it to leave. It wasn't much, but it was enough to hold them over until they could get back on their feet. They ended up renting this little farmhouse on the outskirts of a small, nowhere town. They finally arrived, grabbed a few bags out of the car, and headed inside. As soon as Everly crossed the threshold, she had a cold chill run down her spine. She felt a bad spirit enveloping her space, making it hard for her to breathe. She wasn't frightened, and she didn't show any fear, so whatever was attacking her immediately stopped. She went through the house exploring. It was full of old antique furniture. The house smelled old, and it reeked of mothballs. She headed upstairs, and there were 3 bedrooms. The middle room drew Everly's attention. She opened the door. It was musty, but the room was large. It had a full-size bed, a nightstand, a dresser, a rocking chair, and an oval wooden framed body mirror. Everly walked in and threw her things on the bed and sat down. Now the chill she felt when she came through the door, the front door, she's now feeling in this room. Now she and her mom couldn't bring much, but the one thing Everly did bring with her was an old stuffed dog named Bigby. Her mom told her this was the only thing her real dad ever gave her. He bought it for her on the day she was born, which was coincidentally the last time Everly's mom ever saw him. Although Everly's dad had never tried to find her or contact her, she still wanted to know who he was and why he left. This was a void in her life that would probably never be filled. She kissed Bigby on the nose and sat him down in the rocking chair and said, "Welcome home." Everly opened the closet door. She noticed some things on one of the shelves, so she ran downstairs to get a step stool. There was an old Ouija board, some kind of hardback book, and some pictures. She knew the dangers of Ouija boards, but she was very fascinated with the unknown. She pulled it down and blew the dust off. She set it down on the bed and removed the board from the box. Although there wasn't many things that Everly was afraid of, she was a little scared of the board and didn't want to test it out alone. She placed it back in the box and put it back on the shelf so her mom didn't discover it in the house. The book she found appeared to be someone's diary. Now, she was a little apprehensive about reading it. This was someone's personal thoughts. She heard her mom call her downstairs, so she put it in the nightstand drawer beside her bed. Now, every time Everly left her room and came back, or in the morning when she woke up, Bigby would be gone from the rocker. He was always thrown in the floor. This kind of puzzled Everly, but she really didn't think too much about it. Everly finally overcame her moral dilemma about reading the diary, so every night before bed, she would read a few pages. And this is when she started dreaming about a sad little girl. It was always the same dream. The little girl would be standing in the far right corner of her room, holding a toy in her hand, and asking Everly to come play with her. Everly continued to pursue her interest in witchcraft and still dabbled with a few spells she was familiar with. She really missed her friends and wanted to talk to them, but Everly's mom was afraid her husband would find them if she reached out. Everly knew her past life, along with her friends, were where they needed to stay, in the past. She would have to make new friends here and focus her attention forward to the future. Now, Everly was big on social media, so she created a new one using her middle name and her birth father's last name. She began searching for new friends. She ran across this one girl named Carly, who shared similar interests. She was interested in the paranormal, witchcraft, and even had a goth-like style about her. Everly sent her a friend request, and of course it was accepted. All weekend long, she and Everly chatted back and forth. They were both going to the same high school, so they made plans to meet up the next morning in front of the school at 7:30. Now, Everly had a restless night. She wasn't sure if it was because it was her first day at a new school or if it was the dreams about the little girl. In the dreams she had last night, the little girl was so sweet, and then she turned nasty quick. She asked Everly over and over to play with her, and when she wouldn't, the girl became extremely angry. Everly sat on the side of the bed for a minute thinking about the dream, and then she noticed, once again, Bigby was gone out of the chair. She picked him up out of the floor, gave him a kiss on the nose, and set him back in the rocker. She realized what time it was, so she quickly jumped in the shower, got dressed, grabbed her book bag, and ran downstairs. She snatched a pastry on her way out the door, yelling bye to her mom. Her mom yelled back and told Everly she would drive her to school, but Everly told her no, she was walking. She finally made it to school and saw Carly sitting under the old oak tree. She walked up and introduced herself. Everly knew this was the beginning of a great new friendship. Over the next few weeks, Everly and Carly became inseparable. They did everything together. Finally, Everly told Carly about her strange dreams about the little girl and about Bigby falling out of the rocker every night. She also told Carly about finding the Ouija board up in her closet, along with a diary and photos. Carly asked if she could come over. The next day after school, the girls grabbed a snack, then headed upstairs. Everly showed Carly the diary. She flipped through it, but quickly turned her attention to the Ouija board. Everly pulled it down from the closet shelf and laid it out on the bed. Both girls looked at each other and smiled as if to say, "We're doing this." Everly asked the first question, "Who is here with us?" The planchette moved to E, then S, then R, U, C. Ezrik. Carly then asked, "Why are you here?" This time it spelled out the word evil. Carly asked, "What is?" And before Carly finished, Everly jumped in and asked, "Is it Circe?" As soon as Everly said the name Circe, a gust of ice-cold air swirled around the room. The bedroom door flew open, then slammed closed. The girls sat there quietly and completely still, just looking at each other. The board began spelling out, "Yes." Carly whispered to Everly, "What is Circe?" Everly said, "It's an evil spirit," in the diary. The girls heard someone coming up the stairs. They both looked at each other, then moved slowly toward the door. Everly placed her hand on the doorknob, and just as she did, she jerked it back and started screaming. Her hand had a burn mark. The girls started backing away from the door slowly. The doorknob started turning, and the door flung open. Both of the girls screamed, then realized it was Everly's mom bringing up snacks. Everly quickly covered her palm where the burn mark was. Her mom asked what they were doing and why they screamed. They told her they were about to open the door when she turned the knob, and it scared them. Everly told Carly they needed to do a protection spell. She pulled a book from beneath the mattress. This was a spell Everly had done before with her friends, but never against an evil spirit. This was new territory for her, and certainly new territory for Carly. It was getting late, so Everly and Carly decided to go to bed. As soon as the lights were off, they immediately started hearing noises downstairs. They heard footsteps, voices, something that sounded like someone banging on pipes, doors slamming, windows opening and shutting. The house seemed to be in full motion. Carly and Everly heard the floorboards creaking until whatever it was reached the bedroom door. Slowly, the knob began to turn. The door pushed open, then slowly shut on its own. No one was there, or at least no one they could see. All of a sudden, Bigby was picked up and thrown across the room this time. The rocking chair began to rock back and forth. All of a sudden, a little girl appeared. The little girl smiled and said, "Mommy, come rock with me." The little girl began to twitch in and out of sight. Suddenly, she was standing beside the bed, glaring down at both Everly and Carly. They were both paralyzed, unable to move or scream. The little girl started twitching in and out of view again, then suddenly appeared in the far back corner of the room, just like in Everly's dreams. The little girl started yelling, "Mommy, help me! Please help me, Mommy!" This is when a tall, thin man appeared in the middle of the room facing the girl. He slowly started to turn toward Everly and Carly. They were both trembling. When the man was fully facing them, they could see he didn't have a face. He moved toward the bed and just stood there staring down at both of them for what seemed like forever. And then suddenly, he let out a menacing scream, a scream so dreadful and so loud it shook the house. He slowly began fading away. Then the rocker began rocking back and forth, and the little girl stood in the corner of the room the rest of the night with a look of anger in her eyes. Needless to say, Everly and Carly didn't sleep at all, and they were both extremely tired the next morning. But they both got up and got dressed like they were going to school, and they waited for Everly's mom to leave, then went back inside. They went upstairs, crawled back in bed, and finally fell asleep. Around 1 p.m., they both started waking up. They were sitting on the bed talking about what had happened the night before. Carly started trembling and tried to speak, but she couldn't. Everly started shaking her, asking what was wrong. She raised her hand and began pointing. When Everly turned, she saw the word Ezric written on the mirror in dripping blood. Everly grabbed an old shirt and went over to wipe the mirror. When she touched the mirror, it had a ripple effect. She looked at Carly and said, "What's happening? Is this some kind of portal?" Now this was too much for Carly. She told Everly she was sorry, but she had to go. She ran out of the room. Everly heard the back door slam. From this point forward, things began to escalate. Everly felt compelled to find out what was going on, and she wasn't going to give up without finding answers, and she certainly wasn't giving in to fear. Everly went to the library and checked out every book she could find on portals. She continued reading the diary every night. She became obsessed with it now. She felt the diary held the key to everything. The diary talked about dark forces, named the bad spirit Circe, and whoever wrote it was involved in the black arts. Did it belong to the faceless man she kept seeing? And why didn't he have a face? Everly realized he only showed up when the little girl was in her room. Was he there to protect her? Every night, Everly would lay in bed and hear strange noises throughout the house. She would hear a little girl laughing, footsteps in the hall. someone running up and down the stairs. There were also times when Everly thought she could hear a man talking, but she couldn't make out the words. The voice seemed distant and very faint, but it was a man's voice. She stayed up late reading about the portal and looking up spells to close it. She hadn't done spells like this before, so she was a little afraid of doing something that could make things worse. She was getting tired, so she laid back on the pillow and soon drifted off to sleep. She woke up around 3 a.m. with her bed shaking fiercely. The light started flickering on and off. Bigby was elevated in the air. The rocking chair was swaying back and forth. She sat up in the bed, hanging on to each side so she didn't fly off. She started yelling, "Stop! I command you to stop!" The little girl appeared in the corner and began shape-shifting into something unimaginable. The bed started raising up in the air. Everly realized she was showing fear, and she knew all spirits fed off fear. She had never been faced with terror like this before, and she didn't know how to stop being afraid. Suddenly, the faceless man appeared, and the bed slammed to the floor, and the book of spells flipped open. Everly started looking at the book, and it was a spell to close the portal. The man started pointing at her. Everly began chanting the spell from the pages in the book over and over again. Screams and cries like she had never heard before filled the room. A tornado-like wind started swirling around. Then suddenly it was like a vacuum. The mirror sucked the little girl in. As soon as the little girl was sucked in, everything seemed to calm and the screams stopped. The man was moving toward the mirror. He stopped and turned. Everly didn't know what to expect, but when the man totally turned and was facing her, he had a face, and she could see him. He looked very familiar to her, but she had no idea who he was. She told him thank you, and he stepped into the mirror. As soon as the man stepped in, it was like the mirror sealed itself. Everly walked over and touched the mirror. She took her finger and traced over the blood-written word, Ezric. As she did, she realized Ezric, written backwards, was curse. Everly sat down on the bed, reflecting on everything that had just happened. She suddenly jumped up and ran to her mom's room. She was tearing things out of her closet until she found the lockbox. Everly's mom, being awakened from a deep sleep, was confused at what was going on. Everly pulled out the lockbox and told her mom she needed the key. She had to get inside the box. Her mom told her no, she couldn't open the box. Everly calmly told her mom everything that had just happened and described the man in her room. Tears filled her mom's eyes, and she walked over to the dresser and pulled out the key. She turned to Everly and told her there were things she didn't want her to know about her father, but now it was time. She handed Everly the key. Everly started pulling everything out and finally reached the envelope that had some old photos. She pulled them out and started flipping through until she came across a photo of a man standing with her mom. She sat there staring at the photo with tears streaming down her face. Her mom started hugging Everly and said, "That's your dad, your real dad." Everly said, "I know. That was the man in my room." Everly and her mom spent the remainder of the day talking. She told Everly everything about her dad, and now it was clear. Like Everly, he had an interest in witchcraft and black magic. He got involved with some very bad people, and he was afraid they would hurt Everly. So on the day she was born, he sent Everly and her mom away. He told her to never contact him again. Everly went back to her room, and the diary was laying on her bed. She opened it, and all the pages were now blank. She flipped to the last page, and the word Ezric was written in red. A little girl's laughter filled the room as she heard the words, "To be continued." We hope you enjoyed today's story, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, or the next time you look into a mirror, Ezric may be staring back.